Let's dive in. I have an engaging tale for you today. Make yourself comfortable and remember to subscribe for future stories. She mentioned she was assisting a friend recover from a divorce as she put on her coat almost out the door. Her phone sat on the table by the entrance, vibrating once before falling silent. When I picked it up, the screen illuminated on its own and the name, Jess, appeared. I didn't snoop around looking for anything suspicious. Instead, I accessed her contact details, dialed the number, and waited. The line rang twice before going quiet. A male voice answered without a greeting, inquiring about my identity with cautious precision as if he expected a different question. I simply stated my name. After a moment of silence long enough to hear breathing, the call ended gently. I stood there, holding the phone to my ear as the front door clicked shut, marking my wife's exit. The vehicle sprang to life in the driveway. Its headlights swept over the wall and vanished into the distance along the street. I secured the screen and returned my phone to its original spot, oriented identically, as if no action had taken place. When she returned later that night, I observed her pass me without slackening pace, humming softly as she ascended the stairs. She carried an aroma of wine and an alien cologne, pungent and unfamiliar. She didn't inquire about my vigilance nor glanced at her phone until out of sight. I remained in place, replaying the man's voice in my mind, aware that the events had commenced prior to my dialing and that the subsequent moments would never remain unaltered. At 43, my morning alarm still echoed at 6, regardless of her arrival time. Before she awoke, I donned my attire in the dark, knotted my shoes near the door, and departed. At my workplace, I attended meetings, coded, acknowledged jokes, and responded to emails as if nothing extraordinary had transpired the previous night. My phone remained facing up on my desk, while hers no longer did. 2 months ago, she had been in this very house, disclosing that her old college friend was suddenly calling with news of a divorce, lack of shelter, and collapsing life. She said it briskly, as if stating a fact rather than narrating a story. She mentioned the name nonchalantly, as though I should recognize its significance. I nodded, advised her to act accordingly, and observed her text messaging while she spoke. From then on, the routine commenced unheralded. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, she'd alter her attire, spritz perfume she hadn't used in ages, and hint at potential lateness. At times, she returned after midnight, beaming, rosy-cheeked, discarding her shoes near the door. Other times, she didn't return at all, informing me through a message that she had stayed at Jess's place. Each instance, I would acknowledge with a thumbs-up emoji and set down my phone. She increased her laughter, uploaded photos once more, hummed as she prepared herself. I observed this change because it excluded me. Upon reaching for her in bed, she would say she was weary and turn away without extinguishing the light. In the mornings, her side of the bed was already chilly. By the time that man picked up Jess's phone, this phase of our lives had been ongoing for weeks. I hadn't fully embraced it yet. She began treating her nightly outings as scheduled events. A brief look at the clock, a casual reminder of tardiness, a kiss on the cheek landing beside my ear rather than on it. I witnessed her move about the house more gracefully than in years past, carelessly tossing her phone into her bag, already smiling at something that remained unseen by me. I adapted to this situation. I ordered takeout for 1 instead of 2. I stayed up longer to avoid noticing the vacant half of the bed. When colleagues queried about my wife's state, I replied she was splendid, swamped beyond belief, and retreated to my screen again. On weekends when she wasn't present, I decluttered old files on my laptop, discarded intended donations, and repaired a wonky hinge that had been out of alignment for months. These were minor yet beneficial actions, effortlessly repeatable. When home, her tales flowed swiftly. They were about Jess, wine bars, encounters with college acquaintances she hadn't met in years. She displayed images where she stood slightly apart from the crowd, a drink in hand, beaming directly at the camera. I nodded at opportune moments and refrained from inquiring about the photographer. One Thursday evening, she returned earlier than normal and deposited her bag by the door. Leaning against the counter with residual vigor, she asked if I fancied sharing a bottle with her. I mentioned an early meeting ahead and observed her drinking alone, swiping through her phone silently. The following day, she had vanished before I stirred awake. I convinced myself this was what assistance appeared as. I convinced myself it was transient. I continually created space for something that was already overwhelming me. I didn't seek out anything. Her phone illuminated by itself on the end table while charging, the glow strong enough to catch my attention from afar across the room. I recognized the name before I read the message. Jess. As the preview expanded, I moved closer. Can't wait to see you tonight. He's asking about you again. I grabbed the phone and reread it, more slowly this time. When my spouse reappeared in the room, I was still holding it. I asked who he was, maintaining a steady voice, as I did during meetings when something seemed suspicious. She didn't hesitate. She snatched the phone from my hand, chuckled once, and informed me that Jess had begun seeing someone else. She said he was insecure and joked about others. She stated it casually, like it was nothing of importance. Then she kissed my cheek and went up to prepare herself. That evening she departed earlier than normal. A few days subsequent, minor alterations in her routines appeared. Her phone was no longer left face up. Notifications became mute. When a message arrived, she concealed the screen prior to responding. If I entered a room, she'd adjust it downward without looking up and continue discussing another topic. On Saturday afternoon, I unexpectedly crossed her in the hallway and read a text ending just as the screen blacked out. A solitary line, a location marker, no name appended. That night, she donned a coat I hadn't previously observed and scrutinized herself in the mirror before leaving. She failed to notice me observing from the doorway. When she returned, she went directly to the shower with her phone in hand and locked the door behind her. 2 days later, while searching for the car registration, I found a receipt. The glove compartment was stuck, and when it finally gave way, a folded piece of paper tumbled out and landed near my foot. Without sitting down, I retrieved it. A hotel name was at the top, accommodating 2 individuals. That very Friday night, she texted about overconsumption of wine and unsafe driving. I found myself in the driveway, punching her address into my phone. A destination we'd breezed past 100 times without a second thought. That particular evening, she arrived home earlier than customary, citing exhaustion, before swiftly kissing me goodnight and heading straight to the shower. I waited until the water's noise became a steady flow, then ventured into the bedroom. Her phone lay on the dresser, unlocked, screen dimming. No active messages, no clear trail, just her contact list, ordinary and untouched. I ran my eyes over it once, stopping at Jess. No picture, no surname, just a number. The water continued to run. I hesitated longer than necessary, holding the warm device in my hand. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of plumbing. I knew the timing. I knew that revisiting that screen would irrevocably expand this secret. Made a call. It rang thrice before it was picked up by an unrecognizable voice querying my identity. Without response or raised tone, I posed a single inquiry, one of great importance. The connection remained silent for duration sufficient to discern breaths. I disconnected the call and returned the device to its original place. The shower ceased moments later, the call having concluded and the room remaining static without alarms, rushed footsteps, or any dramatic audio cues. I placed the phone down, retreated a step, and exited the bedroom when the bathroom door opened. She emerged, swathed in a towel, damp hair, and focused on her device. A brief frown crossed her visage upon looking at the screen, then her expression smoothed. She avoided my gaze when she declared fatigue and opted for an early slumber. I stood still as she climbed into bed, scrolling through her device, its light bathing her face. Her finger hovered over an item before pausing, then she flipped her phone over and grabbed for the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. The next day adhered to its usual rhythm. She departed in the morning with a travel mug and a fleeting wave. I proceeded to work. Messages arrived on her phone while it remained stationary on the counter, screen flickering on and off. I refrained from touching it. On Thursday evening, she mentioned meeting Jess for dinner. The following Saturday, she made the same claim. Each time she returned home unworried, unguarded, as if no tension existed between us. I ceased inquiring about matters. I ceased in responding. Instead, I became attentive to subtle indications. The identical perfume sent each time before she left. The consistent duration of her absence. The way she deliberately avoided standing too close upon her return. That man's voice remained unmoved, devoid of any turmoil or ambiguity. I didn't require another call to understand its significance. After that conversation, the household persisted with its routine, but I did not. I ceased filling the silence with queries, opting instead to adhere to routines. Each night, each exit, and a specific window when she couldn't be reached. On an unusual Thursday, I left work prematurely, driving aimlessly until I spotted her car parked outside a restaurant a few miles from home. I didn't hasten inside immediately. Instead, I waited for a sight of her through the window. There she was, seated at a modest table near the window, leaning in, smiling in a manner that hadn't been directed toward me in months. Opposite her sat a man close to my age, jacket removed, sleeve rolled up, his hand resting on hers across the table. She didn't recoil. She didn't scan the room. She didn't appear anxious. She tapped her glass against his without concealment. No one was in disguise. A server arrived, placed dishes on the table, and the man chuckled at something she said. She extended a casual touch to his wrist, a gesture practiced and confident. the kind of touch that implies consent. I stayed outside long enough to observe her phone illuminate on the table among them. She flipped it over, avoiding a glance, and continued talking. Upon reaching my car, my hands remained steady. I remained until they concluded their meal. I observed as they rose. He held open the door for her. She moved closer as they passed the window, his hand finding its place at her back, as if it naturally belonged there. She failed to notice me in the parking lot. She entered her vehicle and departed towards the hotel. I returned home solitary, securing the door behind me. That was the final night I anticipated her return before deciding my next course of action. The following morning, I neglected to refer to the restaurant. I brewed coffee, scanned news on my phone, and listened as she chatted about traffic and deadlines as if it were an ordinary day. She inquired about my evening plans. I stated I was tending to work. She nodded, texting while conversing. Later that week, I took an extended lunch break and entered a downtown office building with my name listed on a clipboard. I faced a man in a suit and pushed a folder toward him. He inquired a few pointed questions, jotting down notes without looking up. I signed where he indicated. Upon departure, my phone chimed with a message from my spouse, informing her she'd be delayed. That night, I initiated a fresh account and transferred modest sums of money. The confirmations trickled in discreetly. I archived them and closed the laptop before she returned. At supper, I inquired about Jess' well-being. She responded with a smile, stating she was managing. I expressed relief at her response. When she left the house, I bid her good night sincerely. The routine persisted. 3 times a week, she meticulously dressed and departed unaware of any changes. 3 times a week, I remained home, organizing papers, schedules, and dates. I stored copies within an unused folder. Coexisting without mutual interaction, she communicated while I merely listened. She designed weekends excluding me, which I accepted unquestioningly. Significant matters had already receded beyond my grasp, though she remained uninformed. On Saturday evening, she traversed the house with her customary pace, phone in grip and jacket slung over shoulder. She scrutinized her reflection, readjusted her hair, and grasped for her keys. I remained stationary and waited until she was nearly at the door's threshold. I nonchalantly mentioned that I had invited Jess and her partner for dinner next Friday. I spoke of it casually, as if it were a favor repaid or a spontaneous decision. I suggested that it would be pleasant to finally match names with faces. She paused mid-step. The keys seemed frozen in her hand. For several seconds, she did not look back. Then she chuckled prematurely and expressed doubt about the idea. She explained that Jess was currently overburdened. She admitted her partner wasn't ready to socialize yet. The words tumbled out swiftly and piled up. I simply nodded and suggested we could postpone the meeting whenever convenient. I stressed there was no urgency. Upon turning to face me, her smile failed to materialize. Her gaze scanned my features but found nothing she sought. She inquired if everything was all right. I reassured her that all was well, then stood up to create some distance. She remained where she was, jacket still on, phone vibrating in her hand. She checked the screen and silenced it unread. For the first time in weeks, she didn't depart immediately. After a minute, she mentioned being tardy and exited without looking back. The door slammed harder than usual. Her vehicle remained parked in the driveway longer than ever before, eventually pulling away. She returned home late that night. I was still awake, seated where I had been upon her departure. Upon entering, she began to discuss a tiresome week filled with traffic woes, expressing her exhaustion. I remained motionless, not interrupting nor moving. Once she fell silent, I retrieved papers from the folder beside me and slid them towards us on the table. The documents were divorce filings, bearing my signature, neatly arranged without any additional notes. She scrutinized them, never touching anything, her grip tightening around her phone. Inquiring about their purpose, I remained silent and nudged the folder slightly closer for her perusal. She opened it, flipped through the papers hastily at first, then slowly. Her mouth parted as if to retort sharply, but closed again. Remaining standing, she appeared unwilling to stay. Then she commenced explaining, mentioning names out of sync, deadlines missed, vows unfulfilled. I kept silent and observed her, recognizing that the script was no longer being followed when she finished. The room became quiet afterward. She seemed to anticipate a response from me, ready to maneuver around it. Instead, I rose, collected my keys, and moved past her without touching her shoulder. I opted to spend the night elsewhere. Several months later, the house was sold and the transaction completed. I claimed my belongings and left everything else undisturbed. I didn't inquire about who she shared living quarters with afterwards. I chose not to find out. The final action I took was to shut the door behind me and carry on walking. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Care to share your thoughts on this tale? Feel free to comment below. More unveiled narratives will follow shortly.